G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle, and today we're going to talk about the Games Workshop Investor Report, but not for the reasons you think, or particularly about the subjects you might think. So the reason we're going to look at it is because friends of mine over at the Eye of Horus, who frequent this show from time to time on our live streams, they brought up the fact that, Age of Sigmar was outsold by the Horus Heresy this year. And whilst I think that's great, and I kind of want that to be the case in Heresy doing well in sales means it should get more support from the company, I also think there's a big problem with how people read and understand these documents. So I want to look at the half-yearly report here and just pick out a few things and talk about, the language used and understanding it. This isn't going to be an exhaustive look at how this is done because, well, there are accounting channels for that sort of thing, but rather, in my position as a very senior manager within a company, I read these sort of reports all the time, and you learn to understand them, and you also learn from being inside companies firsthand how people deliberately obfuscate language in order to portray things in a certain light. So we're going to get into that today, and I don't think that the Age of Sigmar sells badly. I don't think that the Horus Heresy sells badly. I want them both to do well. I actually like Age of Sigmar as a game system as it currently stands, but I can have massive problems at the launch of it, as many other people do, so don't judge me for that. Now, in these reports, you have to understand that the information they're trying to portray is always positive. It doesn't matter whether your company is making no money. If you're losing, hemorrhaging money, they will always put a positive spin on it. They have to in order to keep share prices stable and investor faith in the company stable. So you won't see them turn around and say something like, hey, we made a really terrible decision this year and it cost us a lot of money. You generally don't see statements like that because that is the company basically saying we have no idea how to make a profit, how to run our company correctly. It destroys investor confidence and you start seeing a swathe of firings generated. And I'm not going to say it's the case at Games Workshop, although they weren't successful. That is not what we're looking at here today. So let's scroll down, let's ignore the numbers, and let's look at some of the statements made. Okay, climate change, social responsibility, and sustainability, okay? So this here has absolutely nothing to do with making money. Okay, this is the sort of statement that companies these days throw in because the whole Western world is moving into this period of time where every company needs to have this responsibility and sustainability statement, and it's half about climate change, it's half about diversity every time. These sort of things, you'll see the diversity one up under employees as well. We should, yeah, there you go. These things are put in there because the company feels they must be, not because they're trying to genuinely convey information. Okay, so that's something straight away. Video game partners. Yep, cool. They're telling you who the biggest people they are working with, and really, the ones that they point out here are going to be the ones they are most interested in, what they think are the most important video games. So take from this whatever you want as information. So going down through core information here and into design, warehousing, that sort of thing. So let's pick out something, My Warhammer. Okay, My Warhammer. Registrations for this service continue to grow at a pace and have grown 22% over the last 6 months. My Warhammer is a central part of our customer journey, enabling us to tailor our marketing communications to what our customers are most interested in. We now have 718,000 linked accounts. So, what does that mean? Well, you have to think of it in a special way, okay? Anytime you make a purchase from Games Workshop, you're probably going to be registered with My Warhammer, right? On top of this, if you are doing any of this sort of work, then what's going to happen is you end up in a situation where you're going to be automatically put onto the system. And it doesn't matter whether you are continuously using the system, you are a linked account, okay? So compare this to something similar, like a streaming service. If you have something like, I don't know, Paramount Plus. Okay, Paramount Plus is notoriously one of the worst streaming services. Okay, because they're late to the party, and the big boys have a lot more films and videos in their bank of content, right? So Paramount Plus pulls in a heap of subscribers. How might they do it? Well, they might do things like free subscriber giveaway, okay? And they'll do it within the time frame of a half-year report, for example, like this. And they'll release the free subscription, get a month or two of free subscription. People sign up for it, and then when they go in, they can say, hey, look, we had 10,000 new subscribers this month to our service, and they can say how much they're growing. But of course, did they grow? Have they got paying customers? No, they deliberately leave out information. They deliberately leave out context so you don't know the truth, because these things are designed to give you 2 thumbs up even if the plane is burning, falling out of the sky. So if you look at My Warhammer, they say, registrations continue to grow at a pace and have grown 22% over the last 6 months. So that could be more people chose to buy online instead of in retail stores. Then you look at what is the next most important information here. The My Warhammer is a central part of our customer journey, enabling us to tailor our marketing communications to where our customers most. Not really. There is cookies in there, yes, but this is just fat speech to fill in the sentence. The next actual important information is we now have 718,000 linked accounts. Now, they don't give you numbers. How many people are using it to purchase, okay? How consistent are the purchases? So you could grow 22% in the amount of people using the service, but what if the amount of actual sales generated via the platform went down? In spite of that, you're not being told, okay? So this is how companies deliberately leave out information. Warhammer Plus, next one down. So it launched in August 2021. And then that's important information. So you've got, it is a year and a half old. It continues to delight and entertain a growing subscriber base. Not important, okay? Doesn't matter. They're saying growing subscriber base because if it was really good subscriber growth, they would say something like in My Warhammer, they'd say it grew 20% in the last 6 months, or it grew 50% in the last 6 months. If it was a good number, a high number, they would tell you. Because these companies want bigger numbers, big percentages, give them a hard on. Okay, so when they say it continues to light entertain a growing subscriber base, that's like we had 70 people. It could even be 1,000 people. It's still not very much in the scheme of things. So that is why they deliberately choose this language. Okay, Warhammer Plus shows and animations have now been viewed over 5 million times. That is not really useful information. It's a big number, 5 million, okay? So by saying that, immediately people go, whoa, wow, what an awful lot that is. But hang on, that's Warhammer Plus shows and animations. So that's every single show, every single animation on the service combined. How many are on there? I don't know, I don't have the service. But let's say that every single view, okay, whether you're going on there to make a review for your YouTube channel, you open up that video, bam, that's one view, okay? Then you need to edit your script for your YouTube video, you come back later and you reopen it. That's another view, okay? So I probably gave Rings of Power 400 views. So the amount of views there is kind of irrelevant because you don't know the context. Was how many people watched full duration of the videos? How many times did the same account play the same video over and over again? How many people fell asleep with a show on and the series continued to play while they were asleep, okay? Context is everything when it comes to understanding what's actually being said. So when they say revenue is 3 million in the period and associated development costs are 2.4 million. So they're not saying profit, okay? They're saying revenue. So 3 million came in, it costs us 2.4 million. And that's associated development costs. That's what it costs to set up the service. That's not talking about the ongoing development costs. That's a different category. And that is not addressed here, okay? And then they say our subscriber numbers are 115,000. So if you took a number like that, if you took, say, 115,000 and you divided 5 million views by that 115,000, that would give you 43 shows watched per person. That's probably less than the entire content on the service. So that means that all those people combined probably didn't watch everything that's on there, if you include every single episode of every single thing that's on there. So again, the maths doesn't sync up, but they deliberately use this language that's supposed to fool you, to trick you. Okay, and this is not, I want to be very, very clear here, this is not a Games Workshop problem. This is a Western corporate culture across every major company. Okay? I'm just using these guys as an example. Okay? So, capital investment. In manufacturing, we have invested £3.3 million in tooling and £600,000 in facilities and equipment. The warehousing, we have spent £1.2 million in the period on facilities, racking and IT systems. So $600,000 in facilities and equipment is not a lot. So tooling generally won't include whole machines, okay? Tooling will generally be dies, okay? Dies, cutters, things like that. That's tooling, prototyping materials. Machinery generally comes in most manufacturing reports as plant. It's a little bit different here though, different circumstance, different situation. And 600 grand in facilities and equipment. I would assume that equipment then would probably include things like injection molders, in which case £600,000 will not go far. That's $1 million Australian dollars or so. That's 2 big injection molding machines, 3 little ones, and that's with no additional facilities or anything like that. So if they spent £600,000 in facilities equipment, that could be just electrical work was carried out on the site, for example, to upgrade it from halogen lighting to LED lighting in the factory or something. I don't know. Again, irrelevant information, realistically. So, just an interesting little thing to note. And in warehousing, they spent $1.2 million in the period on facilities, racking and IT systems. How much of that is what? I don't know, but factories are not cheap. 1.2 million will not go far. It just won't go far. I'm telling you right now, like a decent factory, like a big warehouse, could cost you $4 million. Just for the warehouse. That's not including your IT systems or anything like that. We're talking just the building, the electrical, yada, 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 here in Australia anyway. So there's not a huge amount that they actually spend in capital investment. And £3.3 million in tooling is pretty much all the dies that they've created in the last year. That's all that's really saying there, for those who are curious. So if you take the number of new releases in the last 6 months, and then you take that number and divide it by £3.3 million, you're probably going to end up surprisingly close to how much the dies are costing. Okay? And we kind of know how many different releases came out because we had the Vote for Your Miniature of the Year pretty recently. So let's just say it was 50 kits. We know it was a lot more than that, but let's say 50. I mean, there was like 20 in the leagues of Votan. But if you took your 3.3 million and divided by 50 kits, that would be 66,000 per die. Okay? And we know it's a lot more than 50. It's probably 3 times that. So you can get an idea for what things actually cost if you know how to read these things. So that's just some of the language in here, and I obviously picked out ones that are kind of a sore spot for me personally, like Warhammer Plus. But let's think about something like Age of Sigmar versus Horus Heresy, as I alluded to at the start of the video. So, how do you compare the two systems? Well, there is no apples to apples comparison actually possible here, and I'm going to give you a list of why. So let's start with the fact that Age of Sigmar got a re-release or new edition last year. Horus Heresy had one this year. Straight away, the hype train is massive for the Heresy, okay? So because it's in the last 6 months that this report is referring to, you have the associated hype for the Horus Heresy is going to drive marketing, okay? If Age of Sigmar hadn't been done in a COVID year, that would also probably have had a very different result. So you can't use like for like there. Unless you released Age of Sigmar and Horus Heresy's new box sets alongside one another at the same time, you can't get a gauge of what each system is really pulling. Then you have the problem of the fact that the products are definitely not in any way, shape, or form comparable. So with the Horus Heresy, you can do what most people do, which is buy that box set entirely for yourself, because every model in the Horus Heresy box works in your Marine army, as an example. And of course, we know how popular Marines are. On the other hand, Age of Sigmar's box set is half copyrighted Orcs, it's half Stormcast Eternals. Well, that fills a particular niche for those two armies and those two alone. Okay, and a person's not going to be incentivized to buy too many of the same set, are they? Because you don't really double up on... Well, you won't double up on named characters in Age of Sigmar, but some of the heroes you might, okay. But it's not really incentivizing you to buy multiples of that same box, whereas the Horus Heresy box set, apart from coming with a redundant rulebook for everyone, some people might want multiple sets of it because if they buy enough squads, for example, you're going to get 8 tactical squads if you've got 2 boxes. Give a couple of those tactical squads heavy weapons, turn them into Legion tactical support squads, or Legion heavy support squads, or Legion veterans, or Legion seekers. Any number of things you can do there, okay, to change the contents of that box set. 3D print some shields, you know. You've also got the fact that you've got all those HQs in there. Maybe you can sell off the ones you don't want or convert the ones you do. Or you get a couple of Spartans in there, a couple of Dreadnoughts. Maybe you want to trade 2 of your Spartans for another mate has a couple of Dreadnoughts he's not using. You know, swap them out or something. Who knows what you could do there, okay? But it's a lot more beneficial as a box. So people are inclined to buy more. Then you have other intangibles like how many people are going to have cross-system purchases. This is an untrackable figure, okay? Very untrackable figure because you would have to ask each player on a case-by-case basis what they purchased the model for. In Age of Sigmar, there are very few kits, very few models that are going to be purchased for that system and actually being used in another game system like 40k. Whereas Horus Heresy, let's say Sicker and Tanks, Leviathan Dreadnoughts, Contemptors, they're all usable in 40k. And the amount of times I've bumped into people and gone, oh cool, what Legion are you painting? Yeah. Oh no, it's for my 40k army. That has happened to me a lot. It's a little embarrassing, but you know. So that's another intangible here. You can't say, oh wow, Heresy outsold Age of Sigmar, because the two are so fundamentally different. You know, Age of Sigmar is probably closer to something like Lord of the Rings when it would come to working out what the actual potential sales are of the system. You know, a largely plastic system with big new box sets, fantasy world, very hard to take models from one faction, use them in another, not a lot of doubling up of heroes, you know, that kind of thing. Very, very similar. Whereas Horus Heresy is much closer to 40k in that you have a game system that's very broad-based and, well, take the difficulty of Marines, right? You can't just see someone buy the box and go, well, they're going to build Ultramarines. You don't know that. They could build any number of Marines in Horus Heresy with that box set. They could build 18 Legions. But wait a minute, they can use the same box to also build any number of innumerable chapters in 40k, or even Chaos Legions in 40k, or Chaos Warbands, or whatever you like to call them. The models are usable in there, so you could see that happening, okay? And these are the intangible things that make direct comparisons very, very difficult. So keep that in the back of your mind if you are a person who's reading one of these statements for the first time and trying to draw conclusions and trying to predict paths and, you know, financial people and such. They're a different kettle of fish, the accountants. The accountomancers are an interesting bunch of people, we'll say. Ignore a lot of the numbers and figures and learn to cut through the bullcrap when you're reading these things. You know, these things are full of fluffy language designed to confuse you. Okay, so they might tell you how many extra employees they hired this year, but they don't tell you how many they fired, right? That's a thing that happens. They'll just tell you what the growth was, okay? They could tell you that a whole bunch of people, as we saw, signed on to use a certain service, like Warhammer Plus. They don't tell you what the actual growth rate was of the service. If it's less than 1%, that's not a figure they want to give out there because that shows that it's flatlined. And flatlining in capitalism, well, that's just the end. And this is the sad part of the world we live in. And this is what I often talk about when it comes to company greed, is that Games Workshop as a company is seeking eternally growing infinite profit. Okay? Every quarter has to be bigger and better than the last quarter. So if you do 15% last quarter in growth, you need to do 15 to 16% this quarter. Anything less than that is going backwards. And that's a major problem with Western companies at the moment, where they want runaway capitalism. They want this infinite growth, okay? And unfortunately, exponential growth is not a provable, demonstrable thing that happens forever. There is a point where, in theory, imagine a company is so popular, its products supply the entire world. Okay, just one company supplies the entire world. Every single person on the planet is purchasing from them. How do you grow the next year? It's very, very difficult at that point, right? There are no more customers to capture. So you have to come up with another product and convince customers that they need to buy it, right? And this is the problem you find with Games Workshop, is that you have a company here that every year is trying to grow huge amounts of profit. But they also got a whole bunch of expenses weighing on their mind. Whether it's they launch a horrible streaming service, or whether it's because they're buying a bunch of new tooling or new warehouses or whatever it might be, okay? Lots of expenses. And they go, crap, how do we make sure we've always got a buffer so that every time we do a financial report, we look better than the last time? Well, they raise prices, okay? And they've got to raise them by a very, very particular amount. And that amount is an amount that covers the amount of people who stop buying the product because of the price rise. And as long as they have that number figured out and they stick to it, they are very successful. And they've been doing it for a very, very long time, okay? Because you think about it, how many people did you get into the hobby with when you first started? Now think how many of those people stayed, and over what period of time did they drop off? And what was the main reason? I know the main reason people leave this hobby is price. Okay? That's just what my polling has said to me. Now, other people might have conducted different polls and different demographics and come out with different results. But my polling suggested the price was the number one motivator of whether or not people stayed in this hobby. And the competitiveness, or the competitive nature of their lists, is what came second to that. So, in order of priority, this is. So, if you had an army and it cost an absolute fortune to buy, and then they raise the prices on it yet again, you know what, I'm pulling out of the hobby. But if they could make it past that hurdle, then the next thing was they said, I don't like the rules for my army. My army sucks, and they've sucked for 3 straight editions. I'm over this. I'm sick of it. Never get any love from the company, never get any new releases. I'm out. Right, that was the second most important thing to customers. So very interesting what my polling revealed. And those people that quit this game system, okay, they have to be covered in some capacity. So number one is obviously raise the prices enough that them leaving doesn't hurt the bottom line, that you're still making more money than you were before. And the number two is attract new players. And my big problem, and has been for a long time, this is a bit of a side note to the rest of the video, is that attracting new players is extremely difficult with Games Workshop's monetization model. It is far, far too egregiously expensive and overpriced to bring in youth. This game is trying to appeal to youth, trying to appeal perhaps to parents, as a cute hobby. Like, how cool is this hobby? This is good for your kids. They're not playing video games. Fine, okay, that might appeal to them. Might draw in people, sure. But if they can't afford it, or the parents just look at the prices and go, Jesus, I could buy my kid an awful lot of video games for this, that'll probably shut them up for longer. Well, that's a funny situation you find yourself in. And my big fear is that young people are not being drawn into this hobby and staying. That's the big key here. Staying in the hobby. It's all good and well to have people buying the kits and Games Workshop makes profit. But again, there is a market cap. How many people are going to buy kits? do nothing with it, never buy another kit. There is a cap on that. You know, there are only so many people born each year, and there's only so many of that percentage that are going to get into this hobby. And at some point, it's going to hit a price point that is so high, they just can't get into it. And that is when you're truly going to see a change in Games Workshop's profit margins. So those are all things in the back of my mind. But yeah, so just understand how to read these reports, guys, you know, and learn how to read what is relatively useful information and what is not, okay? Like I said, when they list off something like computer games, okay, Total Warhammer 3, Blood Bowl 3, Darktide, those are the flagship games. Those are the games the company sees the most potential in monetization, the ones that are good games designed well. They're not listing off a bunch of the mobile games, are they? Because they released a lot of straight to mobile or straight to Steam trash. But they know they released it as trash, and therefore it's not important. So they name the stuff that is important, okay? Core revenue grew by 10%, not profit revenue. Two are very different, okay? On a constant currency basis, sales are up 4%. What's constant currency basis? Well, that's converting all the overpriced miniatures sold in Australia back into English pounds and then saying, look how well we did in England. Okay? It's not quite that simple, but that's, for our intents and purposes, that's how that works. Trade grew by 11.8% at actual rates, 3.4% at constant currency rates. So what does that mean? Well, it grew by an enormous amount, but that's because we overcharge a bunch of other nations. And when we transfer all their money into our currency, it's a huge amount, but of course in their land it's not. Yeah. So what's an example of this? If a miniature is sold for $50 in England, it's sold for $100 in Australia, and then you add those, you sell one in Australia, you sell one in England, and you go, geez, we sold 200% of this model in Australia. But really they sold 100%. They sold the identical amount. But it was just you charge the Australians so much more. That's what constant currency rate is. Okay? And it's very interesting to see the different markets that they're looking at trying to get into or break into. Very, very interesting. Looks like they got new retail warehousing going in Australia as well, from what I can sort of read between the lines here. Online sales grew by 2.9% at actual rates, but fell 0.5% at constant currency rates. That's a very interesting one. So, again, this is, we sold a bunch of stuff to overseas, but less people overseas bought from us because of the inflated price. Therefore, although we took in more money, okay, we actually sold less physical product. So this is that very thing I was talking about earlier, where it's like, oh, you know, this is a major problem if people are leaving faster than you raise your prices. That is that happening right there. That is exactly what that is. So there you go. You've got evidence of it within here. Okay? So, as I said, learn how to read this, guys, and learn how to do apples to apples comparisons. And if you're not doing that, please don't do a video on how sales and marketing and all that works. Because I know myself that if you don't get these facts, I won't say 100% right, but if you leave any vague room for language or interpretation, people will jump on you for it. And you don't want the debate to shift from what you got right to someone needling at you for the one thing you got slightly wrong because you used a slightly different parlance. You accidentally used revenue instead of profit or profit instead of revenue. Stay away from that crap. And definitely don't do what other people have done, which is turn around and say, oh, well, you know, this system outsold this one, because you don't know the complexities of it. Is it on financial figures? Is it on raw sales numbers? Is it on a range of metrics, both sales figures, sales numbers? But then what is the marketplace that it's catering towards? Are there more people playing one game, less people playing another? Or in the case of Horus Heresy, do you have people from another game system double dipping on it? Okay, these are all things to take into account. So keep that in the back of your mind. Anyway, that's it for me. I'm back with the Outer Circle. I'm mindful of the fact I've been droning on for half an hour now, so I will leave you all in peace to enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Here in Australia, it's getting, it's actually getting hot now. It's 37 degrees Celsius here, and it'll be 37 to 40 again tomorrow. This is the sort of temperature you got to look after yourself. So stay hydrated, drink plenty of beer. Oh, water, drink water. Yes. Take care of yourselves, guys, and I will see you all on the next video.